Okay, so we're rock and rolling. Here we go. Yeah, thank you, Simon, for coming here today. So just to set the theme or the scene or the setting a little bit. Earlier this year, you commissioned me to do a portrait of you, and that was an amazing experience to be able to do that for you and also to deliver it. And through that, also you shared your story, which impacted how the portrait looked and became, and then flips that back to you. And yeah, I feel like we've evolved a friendship through that, through joining, like, we're both part of IceBreakers, which is a cold water swimming group, and through like various other things outside of that. So, and yeah, most recently you shared about your trip to Japan, and we just basically hung out on the beach and had kombucha together. And yeah, it's been like a nice organic thing that's kind of evolved. And like this week I got to know your business side of you, which was like the podcast that you run, and that is the Reframing Marketing, which is amazing. It's you talking about marketing from a completely different angle that kind of focuses on feeling and thought. And I'd love to hear, just in your words, key points in that journey that's kind of got you from being a kid in Chichester to reframing marketing. And yeah, just open the floor for you to share that journey in as few words as possible.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So I grew up in Chichester. I was originally born in Melbourne, but not the interesting Melbourne, the tiny village of Melbourne near Cambridge. And I moved to Chichester when I was 6. Went to school, didn't get on so well with school in the sense that I was dyslexic, but not dyslexic enough to get any help. So I basically failed the dyslexia test by passing it. It's a weird way of, a very 90s way of assessing kids. So I left school at 16 and did a mechanical engineering apprenticeship. I found the more practical application of subjects much more interesting. I did that for 4 years. There's this cartoon called Dilbert. Have you ever seen Dilbert?
You know what? I've not actually seen that.
Oh, it's such a good cartoon. So basically, it's this guy who works in an office and he's got a cat, and his boss is like a real idiot. And they're like the 3-box cartoons. They were published in the paper and stuff like this. Anyway, the guy Dilbert was an engineer and worked at Hewlett-Packard, and it's basically about just the complete madness of the world of working in engineering. It has double relevance because he's also one of the first people to start a business with an email list. So I recently revisited him as an example of someone who was smashing email marketing before email was a thing. I started reading Dilbert, and that basically put me off a career in engineering, or saved me from a career in engineering is how I often phrase it, because I just didn't fancy being stuck in a cubicle for the rest of my life, which was basically what the career of engineering was looking like for me. So I spoke to my dad and was like, I don't want to do this anymore, but I don't know what I want to do. So what else could you do? What about engineering, music engineering, recording studios, which is where my dad had his experience. So we went up to London and chose this university up in London where I could learn that. So it was a private university, very small. It was a really cool uni. And so I went there for 2 years, moved to London. One of the modules we did at college was post-production sound. So it was adding sound effects and Foley and music onto they gave you basically a clip that they'd taken all the sound off of. And it was the trenches before a load of people run over the top. And my teacher was like, you're basically the only person who's done this properly. Most people spend about half an hour on this and then go back to the music, whereas you've spent days on this. So he's like, I think this is where your talent lies. So you might want to pursue this. As an engineer, your creativity in the sound design side of things is really good, and not everybody has that. Making visuals come alive. It's telling a story on the screen that the visuals can't tell. It's the stuff you can't do on the screen you can do with sound. You know, you can make or break a character with the sound that surrounds them. I don't know if you've ever seen The Shining, a romantic comedy.
Yeah.
The trailer where they've just put like the Simon and Garfunkel track under it. So they basically flipped the whole thing of the Shining trailer by just putting happy music under it, and rather than having tense sounds, they've put in quite fun sounds. So they've changed all the doors and the footsteps are different, and they've basically made The Shining seem like a romantic comedy. It's absolutely brilliant.
Wow.
But that's always a good example I use of how you can, the visuals are telling half the story. The other half of the story is all of the sound, because without the sound, The Shining is a romantic comedy. So it's really funny, because it's like two people go to a hotel on holiday. Jack's a writer, but he hasn't got any ideas, and they've got that kind of fun voiceover on it as well. It's really good. So there's a few of those sorts of bits that I think are really important with sound. But even just having that appreciation of it, the guy was already like, what's his name? Stepan was his name. Yeah, he was already like... So he then spoke to the lady in the college, and then she knew someone who ran a post agency, and then he got me a interview for work experience. But then, because there was about 4 or 5 chains of people talking, by the time I actually got there, it wasn't for work experience, it was a job interview. And the guy's like, what are you here for work experience for? This is job interviews. Do you want a job or not? I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Nice. And he's like, right, we'll call you if you've got it. Yeah. And then they didn't call me. So I was like, oh, I didn't get it. It's annoying. 4 weeks later, I was writing my dissertation. I got this phone call. And I thought, oh, that's an unusual London number. Better pick it up. Anyway, so I took the call. And they're like, oh, just checking you're all right to come to Elstree tomorrow for the training. And I was like, for what? And they're like, for the job? And I was like, but I didn't get the job. And there was this kind of muffled sort of like, what do you mean you didn't call him? You fucking, for fuck's... Can you make it tomorrow? And they were obviously like, hadn't told me that I'd got the job. So I was like, yeah, fine, whatever. So yeah, went up to Elstree Studios. And that in itself is quite something. Because that's where they filmed the first 3 Star Wars films. So we were on the George Lucas stage, is where the Big Brother the Big Brother post-production is in the George Lucas stage. And yeah, just the whole history of that place is incredible. And as a runner, I was there on night shift. I did 100 night shifts back to back, no days off. You get all your holiday pay at the end. It's a good perk. So you do this mad, it's 120 days on for the production, and then you get all of your holiday pay as a lump sum at the end, which is, I must admit, nice. And when you're in your 20s, you can do that kind of shit. So, but I got to hang around because there's nothing going on, because literally the people are asleep, so there's nothing going on. So everyone's just hanging around, just wanting to chat. So I actually learned loads. Like I used to play with the big long boom cameras that are outside for the eviction. We'd sort of muck about with them and, you know, go and play with all the different cameras, and I'd go in and look at the sound desks, and just got to meet all the people who are there making it happen, because they have to have a whole crew there in case one of them wakes up and starts doing something mad. But all of those people are just sitting around waiting, and invariably they very rarely ever get up, so there's often fuck all to do at night. So it's really good for learning and just meeting people and getting a bit of experience as to how the whole thing works. So it wasn't exactly the path I had imagined, but essentially where it got me was to working at Elstree Studios for 3 months on Big Brother 7 tape running. So this is back when they used to record everything on tape, which seems embarrassingly old now, but really wasn't. This is only Big Brother 7, so it's not that long ago. The path that led to was then going into work in Soho, making editing and doing voiceovers for TV. So recording the people who come in to do the voiceovers for factual entertainment, as it was called at the time, which is basically bullshit daytime telly. So I did 6 years of that, of sitting in a dark basement editing very questionable daytime television.
Nice.
So yeah,
because it's incredible hearing your story, how you Elstree Studio. That's like incredible. Like you've actually been there, you've experienced it, you kind of played with all the equipment, you've actually like been on like such a monumental show in like British television history at a monumental time as well, when it's actually in its peak. And it's amazing that you've had that experience of you've actually gone on that journey. and the tool that you've gone with is engineering, and yeah, like I guess bringing it to where you are today, because you've also called what you do reframing, which in itself sounds like a very engineering word, and it's like, yeah, you've reframed how people do marketing, and it's a way that you've just restructured it. I'm very interested in hearing the link between, or if there is a link between what you were doing, like when you were editing like Big Brother and the sound on that, to where you are today. Like, how do the two worlds connect for you?
I mean, so after I did the sound editing, I was in. I got bored of being indoors basically, and then made the move into location sound, which is where you're actually recording the sound. So you're out on the set, recording sound, basically. And that took me to some pretty bizarre places. And I kind of got into, without really trying, got into quite a lot of corporate video stuff, which used to be a lot bigger and high production than it is now. But back in the day, brands were spending serious money on brand videos. We got to travel the world doing it. It was really good fun. So I worked with a lot of big brands, and I kind of learnt how slow moving they can be, but also just how almost disconnected the departments are within a big company like that, and just how enormous a machine like that has been. Because I've never been in that kind of company. I've never worked for a company more than like 200 people. Whereas, you know, we were working with enormous brands, like mega brands like GSK and IBM. Do you know what I mean? Like BMW, all this sort of huge brands. It kind of made me realise that actually the disconnect between a big company and a small company was a real advantage for small businesses, and particularly for people who are doing their own marketing, because you can move so quick. You know, these brands take months to even work out whether they want to put their logo on a thing.
Yeah.
You know, whereas for most people that's drag it on in Canva, no, take it off, that's it. Whereas that can take months to get sign off. So that really gave me a kind of insight into the fact that most of the marketing you see from big brands is so disconnected from that brand. There's a marketing agency, there's a PR agency, there's all these people involved, but the actual brand, there's probably only 2 or 3 people involved. It kind of felt like the reality was that you have the brand and then you have the advertised brand, and those two are quite separate. And for me, that felt like a real opportunity, because when you are selling yourself as an expert or a artisan, shall we say, you know, if you're a craftsperson, a designer, a musician, a coach, consultant, a expert in the field, you know, you are selling you. And that is the one thing that brands can't compete with, because there is no you in a brand. There's no one person, pardon me, that is a brand. Because it's like a cruise ship of people is a department, whereas you're there in your little rowing boat. And that to me felt quite exciting, because it's like, well, actually, I felt that a few years ago there was a real push for people to want to connect more, and I think that was sort of coming out of the pandemic, you know, and that I think really opened that thinking in people. And once people have got that, I felt that there was an opportunity there for smaller businesses, and particularly individuals who are sort of selling themselves and what they do, to show up in the places where people would expect to find big brands, but show up in a completely different way and offer something completely different.
It's really cool that you found that area where you found that niche from a big company where there's a lot happening, into very like going into like individuals and who they are and what they offer. And I think something that I'm really curious to hear about is you've built an amazing product. You've built Reframing Marketing, and you like the whole way that you've built that as well. You've not only got like your book, which is incredible and on my next to read list. And the podcast that you've got, which is super cool. It's literally you journaling out like thoughts, but in a way you packaged it in a way that is approachable. So you have these like bite-sized episodes that each go into like a specific things or thoughts, and you really kind of articulate them in a way that's kind of really like you get something from them. And like the way that you've set up your YouTube channel, you've got your LinkedIn, a way to connect with you, like everything's very organized and very put together. And I think like you as a role model of your own product is fantastic. Like you've reframed marketing for yourself, and now you're offering that as a product. And I'm very interested in like the Simon outside of reframing marketing. Like last time we hung out, you shared your trip to Japan, and we spoke about safaris and traveling. And if you have to almost like pull yourself out of being the person who created reframing marketing and be the person who came in to read the book, like who would that person want to be? Because I'm very curious in the whole relationship between a player and a coach, and also a parent and a child, or the teacher and the student. And yeah, I'm interested in, now that you've created this incredible world, it's like who's the student, like who's the child, like who's the player, and how can they use the thing that you've created? Or is that something that you want to be able to use?
I mean, it's interesting having written about it, because then once you've kind of created this framework of how to do it, then you kind of don't have the excuse of, well, I don't know what to do, because you've literally written down how to do it. So it's quite an unusual thing to write a book about the thing that you are doing, because that is just then what you've got to do. So you've just got to show up and do the thing then. Whereas if you haven't done that, then you've still got that, well, you've still got the excuse of, well, I don't know what to do. And so it really takes the power out of the procrastination, because there isn't like well, I don't know what to do. It's like you literally know what to do. You just got to show up and do the stuff that you've written and you tell everybody else to do. You're like, oh yeah, that's it. So there's a kind of quite a weird loop there about writing about the thing you know about, because you kind of end up doing it in your own way. Like the framework isn't so prescriptive in the book that you can't find your own way of doing it, but you know, it's not like it needs, I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time I try and think, oh, how am I going to tell people about this idea? It's like, well, you've already got a whole thing set up to make that happen. So one thing it does do, though, is it allows me to experiment a bit with the ideas. So at the moment, so for the last couple of years, I've been writing a lot about coaches and consultants, because that is kind of who the book is focused on initially, because those people just get the most out of it, and I know that from having worked with them for years. So in that sense, the book is sort of written for them, but there's also a sort of emerging world of AI tools and marketing and stuff, and I'm really interested in that, and I wanted to share some of that with my audience. So I basically just asked the audience, I just said in an email newsletter, I'm going to do some stuff about AI. Does that sound cool? If it does, reply with some questions. And I got quite a few questions back. So I was like, okay, well, people obviously want to hear about this. So I then decided that I would do 6 weeks of content, like so 6 podcasts, 6 videos kind of thing, just on the world of AI. And that's not going to sell me any books. That's not going to get me any one-to-one clients. In a way, that's my kind of vanity project. But I feel like I'm also showing up and sharing stuff in a generous way that makes people think, oh, that's cool, they know what they're talking about, in which point they might then, want to take it further. Or, I hope, just use the AI tools in a better way. Spent the last 5 years really working hard to diversify the income, where it's coming from across the different sectors and how it's split up, blah, blah, blah. The point being, we've got a solid base. So I'm in a very fortunate position whereby that all of that work is started to get me to a point whereby I can have these little experiments and go off and share and do this stuff, as long as it just adds to my own sort of, I guess, credibility as a marketing person. Then ultimately it's still on brand, it's still helping. It doesn't necessarily have to we don't have to be able to draw a direct line between a video I make and pounds in the bank. But that isn't a position that everybody's in. I appreciate that. So a lot of people are in that position where they do need to draw a line between the content they're making, the marketing they're doing, and pounds in the bank. So in that sense, there is a... that's what the book's for, is to help people do that. But there's also the freedom within that framework to help people have a creative moment, or be like, do you know what, this week, so like a couple of weeks ago, I just didn't get my arse in gear and just didn't get the video ready. So I just sent my mailing list an email saying, whoops, I forgot to do the video, basically. I just didn't get my arse in gear. And I got more responses to that email than I've ever had to another email. Because I was just like, I'm just showing up and saying, yeah, I didn't do it this week. But also, I'm just letting you know that it's okay not to do it. And like, realistically, is LinkedIn going to fall apart? You know, am I going to get an email from the CEO of LinkedIn saying, where's your video? Like, no one's going to miss it. But also, the fact is, it's okay to do that. And I think that's why I wanted to share this framework, because a lot of the other stuff I'm seeing out there is the opposite of that. It's high pressure. It's, you've got to do this, you've got to do 3 reels a day, and you've got to be doing all this. And it's all bollocks. It's all bollocks.
Yeah. And I think that in itself kind of like answers the question in a way, because because we spoke about the player and the coach almost, and the way that you've created your business, it's almost like that is the coaching framework, and then within that you are the player, because like I said there, you've got, because the way the infrastructure is set up, you can have a way of just jumping out and being like, I'm just going to experiment and play with the thing that you've thought about just that day or that week, and it's kind of, and that is the player, because it's like you're experimentative, you're in your creative, you're in your flow, you're in your chaotic energy, and you're letting that just basically be its thing, and whatever you create within those boundaries, it's like, it doesn't really matter if it fails or if it doesn't, but you got that freedom to just express. And it's like, it's remarkable that you've created that structure for yourself where the day-to-day is covered and the money goes into the bank, but you've got the freedom to experiment. You actually creating this loop for yourself is actually like inspiring people like myself. Like, for example, like we had a conversation on Sunday, just having a dip in the sea, and then we kind of had a conversation afterwards, and I've kind of been a big fan of you and the way that you like show up as yourself, and not knowing so much about you and what you're doing in terms of business until just this week, but just the way that you compose yourself, like the way that you run like a business, and then the way that you afford to just take a month out and go to Japan and then come home and like be able to like share that, and the composure that you have in terms of how you just operate as a person, and you're genuinely happy, and you have like a real calming presence about you, and like every time I speak to you, like I have this sense of, yeah, I can just be myself as well, you know, and I think you kind of like spread that, and I think it's cool because just by me then asking you like, oh yeah, do you want to just like talk about a podcast, and then all of a sudden like let's talk about the podcast, so let's just do the podcast as we're talking about it, and it comes back down to that whole, I guess, the essence of this conversation, which is, yeah, if you literally just show up as yourself, just do the thing that you want to do, then it will almost like just make itself. That's almost like how I'm kind of reading parts of what you said. It's like from where you started to where you are now, it's like it's been a continuation. And the person that you've become today like has the things that you've done in the past, but it's almost like you're looking forward, like this reframing marketing, you've already reframed it for yourself, and then you've turned it into a business and a product, and now you're within that product, and the things you're doing within that are then kind of like you've got your own experiments, you're like got your own products, like things, different income streams are kind of happening, and then you're also like being on other people's products, kind of just to feel the flow, because from being who you are, you're kind of allowing the next person to be themselves. And I think like having like listened to your podcast just this week, when you said on it about when you like the way to kind of like combat AI is just sharing lived experiences, and also around just showing up as you are, because AI can't do that, because it would have edited certain parts, so it would have like just put that control back into how it articulates something. But what AI can't do is basically make a mistake, or it can't just like be itself, or it can't just like be vulnerable. And I think just by showing up and being vulnerable, you already kind of like growing your brand, you're already growing yourself, you're like pushing past that thing and just doing the next thing, and that'll almost like compound into the next thing. So I guess I kind of like went on a bit of a sidetrack there, but I feel there is something there in the sense of the way that you've created an engine, and now you're just running with it. I think that's really...
Yeah, I mean, I think there's you know, speaking now, I can say, oh, it's going well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, you know, it is, but getting to this point has taken a lot of work. It's not like we haven't had our time in the kind of treadmill of it. And then our business coach, who we then started working with, he came in and, it's going to sound weird, but he reframed it for us. He reframed that whole agency experience and was just like, why do you have to grow? We were like, well, because that's what people do. And he's like, yeah, but you don't have to do that. It's your business. And we were like, oh, yeah. It kind of took us 10 years of being a business for someone to remind us that it's our business, so we can do what we want. And he's like, you don't have to build a business to sell and exit. You can just build a business and like live in it. And just build a nice place to work. And even if you build a nice place to work just for you two, that's cool. So we were like, oh shit, yeah. So he sort of, you know, set us our homework and off we went. And he basically came back and he said, right, here's the question. What does it look like when it's done? And we were like, right, okay. And we basically decided that it would look like we'd had a really good time doing it, but actually once it's done, it's done, because people will come and choose to work with our agency because they get to work with me and Ben. They don't come to our agency because they get to work with the agency. So we're not a agency like Saatchi, or, you know, to pick a mega agency, you know what I mean? We are two people, and if you like us, you get to work with us. That's our deal. Is that you don't have to build someone else's business. You should be building your own thing. And if your own thing is, you say, I want to earn £25,000 in a year, £24,000 a year, so I want to earn £2,000 a month. That's enough. That's all I need for whatever your situation might be. Let's just, you know, round numbers. Then that's what you do. You do you. You don't have to do what everyone else is doing or find something else, you know. Andreas Nest was the coach we worked with, and he absolutely transformed our business in the sense that it was, that conversation and asking that one question just made us realise, oh yeah, we don't want to sell, we just want to make enough money along the way so we're comfortable and we don't have the stress of project to project, we can put some money in the pension, we can save a bit of cash, but we can go on holiday. That's what we want. Is that too much to ask? And he's like, no, that's actually quite good because that's achievable. We can do that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if we'd said, we want to make, 10 million quid selling an agency, he probably would have been like, you guys are idiots.
Yeah, not kind of wishing for what other people have and really kind of honing into what you want. And I think that in itself is really infectious and really grounding, because it almost like removes all the fluff and says, actually, hang on a minute, like what I offer is just me, or like that is effectively like what it is. It's like you said there, like when, like if people want to work with you, then they will work with you, and it's like you're not aiming for the big flashy clients. You're just kind of going in for the people that want to spend time with you and work with you. And I think, yeah, like coming to, I guess, a bit of a closing question, like is there a particular type of business or type of cause or type of thing that you want to help engineer? Like,
I think really it's a case of trying to help people do what they want to do, and that sounds a bit sort of corny, but I think a lot of people don't end up doing something they enjoy doing, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be, loving 100% of your day to day. Obviously, I still have to dig out receipts and do accounts and do all the stuff that I don't mind it, but I don't. Do you know what I mean? It's not why I get up in the morning. There's obviously bits of business that are always going to be a bit shit and a bit like, oh, for fuck's sake, and you're going to have wins and losses, of course. But there is an element of being excited about the work and finding the work energizing, and I think that's the key, is to try and find some energy in what you do. And I would hope that the energy you create in the business you create is giving other people energy, because there's a lot of ways to make money out there that aren't energizing. They're like feeding off of others, and I can think of a lot of ways I could be making money. Right now I could go and set up some businesses that are essentially just feeding off of other people, and but that doesn't energize me.
And energy is currency, just like money is.
And
if you're creating energy, giving people energy, you're giving people money because they're energized with what you've said. And I think like just by being yourself, you help people to break away the things that they have and kind of like allow vulnerability, allow emotions to flow. Like just us doing this right now. Like we're effectively talking about the podcast on the podcast, recording the podcast, doing the podcast. It's like a podcast within a podcast, but it's kind of like just that in itself is enough to be like, fuck it, we didn't sit here with a pen and paper and a script. We literally just like off script making this.
Just do it,
And I think like that in itself is energy, and it's like inspiring the next person to then be their energy with, by just being our energy.
I think so, and I think creating energy for other people or inspiring them to do something that energises themselves and others is ultimately what I think we need more of, is people doing that, and less people just looking for a way in to make a quick buck. And I think, as sort of righteous as that sounds, I'm very conscious that I'm sat here as someone who is in a fairly fortunate position in terms of business. But
you've created that.
But I've created it, and that's what I try to come back to all the time. Every time I catch myself thinking that, I'm like, no, but you've put the fucking graft in to get there. And we're not feeding off other people. We are making something that is, I hope, kind of helping to inspire and energise people. And I think really that is the key, is if you can find something to do and then that energises you, and you can turn that into a job in some way, or even you can connect it into a job in some way, then I really feel like there's something in that, and I hope that there's there's a way you can find to turn that into a business, and yeah, just spread the energy basically.
Because whatever you consume is energy, innit? McDonald's, you kind of whatever you eat, drink, smoke, whatever it is, kind of it's all energy that you're kind of putting into yourself to energize some. It's consuming. This is basically nutrients for giving to people's ears.
Ear nutrients. There we go.
Yeah.